so that everybody knows for the first time, if you're coming for the first time, we do have this bi-weekly hour-long session, and we've been meeting since 2018. Right now, we have about 470 people on the invite that are ServiceNow customers, and another 175 people from ServiceNow that attend on or off. So usually we'll get around 100 people on a call week to week. And the big thing that the group is working on this year is digital transformation in general. We changed that a little bit from last year where we just focused on digital services, but it's all around that transformative piece too. And a lot of that is, how do we reimagine the services and the business models behind the services, but also how do we take the current ones, make them faster and measure them better. So our mission is to really enable everybody that's involved in that process. And it's a very broad spectrum of people. So what I was asked to do a couple of years ago in this group is make sure that I put the topic out before, because there's going to be some things that are relevant to you and some things that aren't. All the shared work that we have is out on a Google Drive today, and I put that out in the newsletter. And I think usually somebody will drop it in the chat, the link to that Google Drive. And we have a lot of shared papers, and all of our videos from prior meetings are shared on that as well. This year, we also changed it too, where it was a lot of, I was hosting most of the meetings and there was some people coming in, but this week our whole group has really jumped in, and I have a member of our group on today who's going to help me through this presentation, Don. And we have 9 people on our team right now, on our direct team, but altogether there's about 30 enterprise architects across the Americas. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring all those in from week to week, depending on the topics that you guys need to hear about, where people are getting stuck, kind of like we've been doing, right? Top of mind things that we're seeing from day to day. We want to bring those to you on the group and kind of drill down on them a little bit so that everybody can share. And we do have executive sponsorship this year, so that might mean some different things. Hopefully we'll have them on in a couple of weeks to talk about what that means to be sponsored by a group that's higher up in ServiceNow. That can do certain things for us going forward. And some of those might be some of the things we do at Knowledge and different things like that. So if you're new to the group, we have this kind of a tradition where we've been starting. If you can just drop your name and the company you're from in the group chat so that we can go back and make sure that we recognize you and just know where you're coming from. Especially if it's your first time, we want to hear from you. With that, I think, let me just check. There is somebody letting everybody in, right? Yeah. Thank you, whoever's doing that. Appreciate it. All right, so let's get started, Don. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a service, an idea for a service, from when it's an idea all the way through to when it lands in production. And we're going to talk about some of the pieces along the way. Put material together for this, it was really hard because it's huge, right? It's so we're trying to get enough of the material together so we can have good conversations around it. And then maybe, I know some of you guys from Montana, and Don, I think some of your customers may be here. If anybody wants to chime in, this is a work group. This isn't something where we're here to tell you the perfect way to do this, because we don't really know what that is for your organization. But we'll at least talk through some of the, I think what we were talking a lot about this week was the happy path. So how do we get through that whole process? Along the way, we'll talk about some roles and responsibilities, and then we'll talk about a big piece, which is really reporting on what you're building. And that's been a big challenge along the way. Anything to add, Don? Or?
No, I think the topic's very relevant. I mean, with a lot of my customers, they're asking questions around, how do I plan for new services, particularly taking them from idea to deployment? How might I govern my services? Along those lines, what method should I use to prioritize the work? Who should be involved in the decision-making process? What metrics should I be using to track progress and the maturity of existing services? And then, what are the appropriate roles I should establish to manage this all effectively? Mm-hmm. And what might a RACI look like in terms of those roles?
Okay. So let's get into it a little bit. And the use case that Don and I talked through today is we wanted to pick some, because we have a lot of different people from different industries. So we wanted to pick something that would be relevant to mostly everybody. So we picked a travel request. So there's a new online travel request that they want to do for a department, and we purposely kept it simple so it didn't turn into some big project. Right, and what we want to do is, last time we shared this diagram, and what I did here is I took everything circled in green because this is going to be a takeaway for you guys. And one of the things I mentioned in the beginning is, besides sharing the Google Drive, we also share an instance. So you'll see this link to all these things where the green boxes are highlighted. And what that'll do is that'll drill you into that particular area in ServiceNow. And so if we start out, and the way that we like to start out, right, is with an idea. Now, a lot of times what happens, right, is most of these things are, like, if we talk about current state, a lot of it is email. And with a lot of my customers, I see, hey, there's an email where the idea happens. Then there's an email telling somebody to create the form. And then there's an email going out saying, move the update sets. And so we want to kind of look at something more mature than that. And that's the way that a lot of people are doing it today. And then this is the way that ServiceNow prescribes to do it. And Don, how many people would you say are using IDEA, if we start in the beginning, that you work with? I probably see about 10%.
Yeah, I see probably about the same. But I think it's a topic everybody's interested in, and many are planning on taking advantage of it.
Okay. And Don, I didn't even ask you to introduce yourself, but just tell everybody what sector you work in too, so they know where you're coming from.
Yeah, so Don Tierney, I'm a peer of John's. I'm devoted to the medical vertical, so medical providers, so hospitals, clinics. I've been with ServiceNow. John and I actually started about the same time, so just going on my 5th year.
Good deal. All right. So the parts with IDEA, as you guys click on these, you're going to be able to go ahead and bring up with your login, because everybody's an admin in this instance. So you'll be able to go ahead and click on what I just did and bring up the IDEA portal. So most of you have access to this today, and then anybody can create an IDEA. So there's no license required in order to create an IDEA. So I did, just so we could talk about this today, I created an online travel request service for my department, right? So our use case, assuming we start here. And then with this use case, when I put it in, there was a category, so you could put multiple categories on it. So this is just an improvement opportunity, because today I fill a PDF out and I have to email it to my manager. And what happens here is, with the IDEA, it lets you collaborate online. And I think most people are probably familiar with this. You can add comments to it if I want to. I can go ahead and vote it up or down as a user. And then a lot of the things that I get why people aren't using the IDEA is because there's not somebody to go in and look at those ideas and figure out which ones they're going to pull forward. So that's the biggest objection I get to why people aren't using it. And do you hear about the same thing, Don? Or
I do. I think in some cases it becomes a bit kind of overwhelming in terms of the number of ideas coming in. So in terms of managing it, that's kind of a similar objection I hear.
Anybody else on the call want to chime in? Is anybody using IDEA or having good success with it? I don't know if Santa Monica's on. I know they just stood up a real nice IDEA portal.
Our guy's using IDEA. We're doing IDEA in demand. Our business relationship managers are overseeing it. So they're trying to capture the needs of the customers and for IT, and then put them in there. We're not fully using it. I'd like to see it used more than we are, but at least we're capturing things and
that's awesome.
Putting them in and then trying to evaluate them. So
getting started, right?
From Santa Monica, yeah, we are using it We are using it for one of the segment of the projects, our CIP project, capital investment projects portfolio. But yeah, it is open organization wide where people can submit ideas and people can work on, and then it's through approval process. We would like to use it for like a smaller ideas, like what John is suggesting here.
And how many ideas do you have in there, Prasanna? Because you've been live, what, about 2 months now?
Yeah, it's about 200-300. Yeah, that, yeah.
Hey, John, it's Rich Best from Banner Health.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah, we've been using it for years now. So we've modified the out-of-box experience. And all work that has to be developed on goes through that process, and it gets funneled to the appropriate process owner before it makes it to development.
Awesome. Okay. Good deal. It's good to see more people using it now. That's good to hear.
Yeah, we actually have 2 idea portals. This is Brenda from UC Davis. We have one internal for our unit and then one across the campus that we use. And so anything that comes in from a ServiceNow perspective has to come in through the idea. And depending upon the size, we either turn it into a demand, so a lot more business analysis can occur. Otherwise, it'll go straight to a story into our development process.
I love that, because then you have your internal portal, your external portal, and you got service areas, right? And then you got a different demand queue or idea queue for both of those.
Yep.
Cool.
Lauren Bechtold, Salem Health. We're also using ideas for managing our projects as the first initiation, going into demand afterwards for discovery work, and then finally a project.
Okay, I'm wondering too, that's great to hear everybody using idea. I wonder how many people are just still going straight to demand, because a lot of times that's what I was seeing a trend last year, where a lot of people were skipping idea because people were educated enough and knew enough of the business case to go into demand. But it's great seeing everybody using that. So when you come in,
my name is Layla Lilly, and I'm currently at Deloitte, but when I was at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana, we did ideation through to project by people submit ideas. It either went to a defect or a demand, and then depending on the size, if it warranted a full project, it could go to project, or if it was just an enhancement that could easily be worked, it went through the faster track of an enhancement.
okay.
So,
So you use all the options that were in here.
yeah, and that was back in 2016. So.
Okay. Excellent. It's the next part is, and I know some people are still doing this outside of ServiceNow, right? So that's possible too. I'm just linking the ServiceNow ones. The next part that a lot more people are asking me about, especially with the release of DPM, right, is this is usually where it passes through a single place. We're starting to get a lot more where we're spreading out, especially with citizen development. We're letting certain departments develop their own forms instead of making IT the bottleneck. But I think in this part, it still has to come out, and usually somebody owns a matrix and says, okay, how do we rationalize how do we pick the app that we're going to use for this? And that vetting process that we have here, this is if you have APM. If you don't have APM, right, you can use DPM, which is, everybody has that now. But basically this lets you either look at the applications that you have, the different capabilities that you have and what's available for those capabilities. So there's a capability landscape in here too, or the technology portfolio. Now, if you don't have APM, right, there's the DPM piece, and that's the digital portfolios. So that's another way to kind of look on the digital portfolios. For those of you that installed this after our last meeting, we can go down here and this is more just a big list of business applications. Okay, so how many people, I'm just wondering too, do you guys feel like you have pretty good lists of your apps in here? I think I have 114 in our dev instance, but is this method used at all, or do people have a pretty good idea? Oh, this is the type of service that's getting developed. We're going to use this app for it, right?
Hey, I'll bite, John. Yeah, we got about 700, as you know, but I wanted to go back to your other slide, and the caller, and I apologize, I didn't catch the name, asked the question or describe what they do. In your slide where that funnel is going into demand and your backlog, is the story supposed to be representing a project? Because what I thought I heard is, okay, the demand comes in, you have to decide if it's going to be a feature or enhancement. Those are typically operational in nature, where user stories would go into PPM and you actually form a project. So do you go left? Is it operational? Do you go right? Is it project? Is that, I don't see that represented in that other slide that you were just showing. How are you trying to depict that, where you make a decision whether the demand is going to be a project, you know, meaning it's could be a year long or whatever, capital funding, or it's operational, it's just going to be, you know, enhancements, and, you know, you can call those projects too, but I'm really talking about you create an actual project in ServiceNow.
Yeah, I'll show some of that as I'll jump ahead a little bit in this slide, right? But the slide actually comes through and it talks about how some of those other things are going to get ingested through some of the other streams. So a lot of the operational will come in through this way, through an incident, but also off the demand, some of those will come in too. So it doesn't have all the paths depicted here, but that's more of that kind of operational path that we can go on. And in demand, maybe I should show that real quick, Lou, just to your point, so people can see that in the demand record where that happens. But in the demand record, what will happen there is when we go in and create the new demand, and I think we want to talk a little bit about the create new demand. Oh, I want to pull all my demands up actually. So this demand is already pushed through, the one I have here. So if I go into all the demands, and again, this is in the instance that you guys have access to, we should see some in there that aren't approved yet. And then any of those that aren't approved yet, you can still change the path for whether that flows into an operational or not. So this one that's on the top, real intelligent name on there. This is strategic, and therefore you have project, epic, story, even some safe options if you're using safe. And then if you go to operational here, to Lou's point, sometimes these are going to turn into operational, and then they're going to drop down into a different type of record.
I'm having either, and it's okay if it's just me, but I'm having some significant lag, so I'm not watching you in real time. So I was just, I know what you're talking about because I'm very familiar with how that all works. So okay. If everybody else is seeing it in real time, I think there's no issue.
Is it lagging on everybody's side?
No, that's great information to be sharing.
Yeah.
Is the video lagging at all as I'm clicking, or?
I don't have lag.
I don't either.
It's probably just me. Don't worry about it, John.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a part that I think it's the single point, because like Therese and you guys from Montana, we were talking here where it's not only trying to figure out the apps that you use, but for travel requests, for example, is there 6 other departments asking for a travel request and everybody's doing it on their own, right? So you open the floodgates to ServiceNow saying, hey, you can have citizen developers developing their own forms, and then everybody comes and does the same thing. So now you move your technical debt from all your SharePoint sites and everything you have today, and you move it to ServiceNow because you got 48 different travel requests. So I think that type of rationalization happens up here as well. So I think it's at the service level as well as the application level. And is anybody seeing that too? Is having governance issues up here with having either an architect or somebody that has broad knowledge of everything that's going on? Is there like an architecture pass through in your group? And Don, is that part of the governance that they're mentioning today?
Yeah, architecture playing a very important role in that, right? Yeah, I would agree.
And they're solution architects, or the enterprise architects, or What type of people?
Or maybe a combination of both, actually.
Okay.
Hey, John, this is Craig from Esri.
Hey, Craig.
Quick question on your service portal path to demand pipeline that says work requests. Is that similar like your service offering and maybe an enhancement request? Is that what you're referencing there, or what is that?
Coming down here.
Yeah, service portal to work requests going into your demand pipeline.
What they're just talking about, yeah, here you can actually do through the portal, you can drop an idea and a demand in directly for those that are skipping idea. Or you can go in through the incident path, right? And then people convert it into a problem, a change that ends up in your backlog as well. Was that your question?
Yeah, I was curious if this was grabbing your services and your service offering to get directly to a demand.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Not yet.
I see.
Yeah, we're gonna, because if the incident's classified, right, that's what we're hoping, then it would drag it along. But if it's not classified, it's going directly into here. They're not going to have any idea when they submit that demand unless it's an improvement, right? Then it could turn.
Yeah, I guess that was my question: is if this was purely a defect, or if it was something they were asking to be enhanced.
And I could see a button on the service page, right? You pick your service and say, this is the service I want to enhance for those people that are more advanced and know more about their demand requirement. I could see that happening. Cool. All right, let's drop down. I'm going to go through these areas pretty quick because I want to spend a lot of time, most of the time over here, actually. The investment planning piece, I did link this. There's been more people asking about this. And for those of you that have been using ITBM, a lot of people don't know that they could just turn this on. And you could basically specify your funds. And then with the funds, you can have people request from those funds. Right? So basically, I could take my demand, and when the analysts or the business, the BRMs, that's what I was looking for. When they're going ahead and vetting that out, they can actually say, I want to use a little from this fund, a little from that fund, or this is the fund I'm going to use to fund this demand as it's going through. And you can do that type of planning with this investment funding piece. So that's something you do have to turn on. If you do have ITBM standard, you will have access to this. So I just wanted to make quick mention of that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just going to show it to you at this point. Is anybody using investment funding today? Okay, yeah, it's pretty new. So there might not be a lot of people using that. But if somebody is interested in that, let us know and we can get you some more information on it, or just go to your dev environment and turn on the plugin. So it's called investment funding, the plugin that you might not have turned on. I know I talked to a couple of you guys about it. Okay. Now the other area here, if you're doing, is anybody doing portfolio planning where they're actually approving demands in bulk with through a portfolio management scenario? Project portfolio planning. Don, you guys have anybody doing that?
We do. Yep.
Okay.
Definitely.
And do you actually see them do like quarterly planning or yearly planning where they're picking these are the do's and these are the don'ts? And
both. So yeah, quarterly. Some of my customers are doing quarterly, and some do annual planning there as well.
Okay. Okay, good deal. So I'm going to switch here just to the default view on demand. Now this is what we're doing today is we're talking through basically a new service that's coming out for the first time. So create an online travel request. And what we decided here was to take the epic path. So this is what I'm wondering too, a lot of ways to go, like what body of work is this? Because I wouldn't want to create a project just for that. If there's an existing one, maybe an enhancement. Is anybody doing these just through change requests? If somebody wants a new form and a workflow, or a form that follows a standard workflow, what are you guys using today for that? Like
At
this
Argonne,
travel
we're
report.
actually using, we have a catalog item, but that actually goes to the business application owner. And then
Okay.
they rank the priority, and then they meet with the product owner, and then they decide, does it become an epic? You know, they talk about the amount of work that's going to break out of that. So
Okay, so the idea would be classified by the business app, or where does that get picked?
that gets picked by the business application owner usually.
Oh, like here?
Yes, sorry. Yep.
Okay. Okay. That's the transitions that I get a little confused about as I'm going through this. I'm like, okay, like, you know, to your point before, Craig, too, where do they know the service, and where can the service become the context for pushing this whole thing through so that the team for the service actually gets involved? Okay, so the next thing is, as we go through, now that we decided this is going to be an epic, I linked it to the epic itself. So as we go, that's the demand one. We go through epic here. And now let's say we created this epic for, you know, from the demand. So we're bringing all those artifacts with us. And basically what we're doing here is we're saying this epic now has to have a landing spot. So what I did is I created I assumed we would have a product defined for it. A product that this can land in. So basically a team, right, is assigned to the product. So this is, you know, whoever's using Agile, I know it's a little bit different on SAFe, and it's a little different if you're using project directly. But if you're using Agile, this is kind of a happy path for that, where the epic can be assigned to that product. Now, once you get the epic, what I did here is I linked story in. And I think that the epic style really works well for doing this. So then we're going to have a story. Whoops. I linked the wrong stories in there. We'll fix that slide before I send it out to you guys, so we make sure we link to the board. So on story, we go to the Agile board. Okay. So on story, if we create a travel and expense backlog for the travel and expense product, right? So now we're saying, okay, we have travel and expense, and I'm saying, let's get all the stories that are involved with this travel and expense product. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about changing here a little bit is, okay, now we have the epic, we start defining stories against them. And usually when the story comes in, it's going to be, hey, I need to create a form and I need to create a workflow. But with what we're doing today is we want to give visibility to this service that we're building. And we have that new role called the solution owner, right? So we want to give that solution owner visibility, up-to-date information about that service. In this case, it's being built. It's not built yet. So if we look at that story, what we can do here in the story, and then do kind of a first release that doesn't even release the form, right? What the first release could do on the story is it can say, create the business service for your common service data model, right? Create the business service, create the offering itself. And then after you create those, you'd probably have to do a new Scrum task that said, validate reporting on the service. If I could spell right. Reporting on the service with and if you're calling them service owners or solution owners, owner. So what we want to do here is make sure that we go ahead and validate that so they're seeing the right things and they have the right names for their services, in this case, the travel expense. And then the last thing I would have in this one is go ahead and once you create that story, go ahead and promote that to prod, right? So I want to go back now because in the travel, in the well, this is in the story itself. In the story itself, I want to go back now because I didn't have a service and a service offering in production before. So I didn't have this thing in production called travel and expense and then a travel request underneath it. So what I had to do is I had to tell somebody in the Agile workboard here to go build those objects in the CMDB for me, right? So I had to have somebody come in and say, okay, build the service out and then promote that service to production. And then what they want to do is they want to go back and link the idea, the demand, and the epic. So now that they're all related to that story, or all related to that work effort. Okay, so what I'm after here is we want to go back and we want to do, this is what we looked at last week. Some of you might not have seen it, but it's the digital portfolio management. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that somebody could come into digital portfolio management and see that story, right? So if you go ahead and create it, what you'll have in your list is you'll have a service offering here. If I go to all of them, I'll have a service offering called travel and expense, right? A service called travel and expense, and then a service offering called travel request. So what will happen here is if you promote this to prod before you wait till you're operational, everybody will be able to see how many ideas do I have in the travel request today? How many demands do I have? Like all these things that we had, once we link them, once we build the travel request and put it in prod, we can actually link those ideas so that the solution owner is able to see these ideas. And so if we go back to our idea from the beginning, let's just go ahead and link one. If we go back to our idea here, our original idea for create an online request. And if we see that idea inside of, I don't know if we want to go back that far or just start with the demand. Depends on what you want to give that solution owner visibility to. But if I go into this real quick and just go direct to the record. But inside idea, like all these records, they'll be able to go ahead and be able to have that service and the service offering on it. So right now, if I look at the create an online travel request and my business service and my service offering are empty. But now that I define those as a first step in my epic, I can go ahead and create that. So now I have travel and expense is the business service for that idea because I know that now because it's created. And then within travel and expense, I have that travel request service offering that we're building. Expense. And so once those are created, if that parent must not be created in there. Once those are created and I update my idea, I should be able to come back here in the and my solution owner should be able to see that idea here linked here. So I think I did something wrong with the parent-child relationship, but basically that would, and then your demands would be the same thing. If you classify your demand, you'd be able to see the same thing. So if I come back up, let me come back up and go to the service itself and you can see it there. It's because not only travel and requests, but there's going to be somebody that owns the whole portfolio for travel and expense. And so if we go back to our list and we look, instead of the offerings, I look at the services themselves and I should see that travel and expense service and somebody owns the bucket of it, right? And in there, if they're looking in the plan phase, they should be able to go ahead and, my demo's not working very good here, and see that idea is now linked. Right, so that's the idea behind doing that first step of the work that you have to do, is once you go ahead and you're putting that in your story to say, go ahead and link that service in, then what you're doing is you're giving that visibility early on to that service owner, right? To that solution owner. So let me go back up here. Right, so basically what you're doing is you're saying, here's your service visualization piece. And what we're doing is we're saying in release 1 of this story, or of this group of work, right, that we're doing. So that story that we created to create that travel request, we're now saying, here's your reporting on it prior to it being released. Right, so you're saying, okay, here's all the metrics we're going to pull first, and then that's what you're going to see over time. So basically what they're going to do here is they're going to see the plan information, and then once we move it into build, right, we're going to name our epic with this. So we'll see the epics. And to your point before, if any changes, if we turn anything into changes, you'd be able to go ahead and see those requests on here, and you'll be able to track everything going on with travel and requests as they come through. Okay, so that's, if we go back real quick and think about the people involved here. So this is on the top, this is more of a, so let's name these real quick just so we could put some tags on here. So on the top of this.
John, after you're done, I would go back on that last area where you were showing in Digital Portfolio Manager, the change requests.
Yep.
I'll wait for your cadence though.
No, go ahead, because I'm going to jump off this topic. So if,
okay, yeah. So again, I have a lag, so I'm not seeing it in real time, but those change requests under that section, are those going to be any change requests under that service offering or or business service, or are those just going to be changes that go through the demand and project process as you just demonstrated? Because under the run tab, there's also, I think, change requests. So,
Yep.
or is there some criteria in which a change is going to fall under the build versus under the run?
I think in this one where it's on the run tab, unless they've changed it, it used to only be unplanned changes. So it's like things that are going on where they got to do some repair. And I think in the build, what they're doing is all changes that are classified as that service, business service and service offering. So the tag actually has to be the business service and the service offering. It's not impacted services and service offerings.
Okay, thank you.
Because I know there's two different places in the change, right? There's the list that says impacted services, and then there's the actual fields that say business service and service offering.
Right, you select the main CI and then you refresh impacted CI or services and you can see them all, right?
You got it, yeah. All right, so Don, anything to add here? I've been hogging this mic here.
No, good job. There was a question in the chat about DPM and how to enable that. Whether you do it through plugins or is it through the store?
Yeah, if you go back and I'll send you the recording from last week. We went through that at the beginning of last week's presentation, but it's through the store. If you go onto the store, you have to be on Roam patch 5 or above. And if you go onto the store, you can download that and turn it on. The other point I wanted to make here too is,
John, real quick, is there a cost for the DPM, an extra cost, or is it just part of the standard license?
It's part of standard license.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you'll get to, it's nice too because you get a lot of new PA stuff too. So a lot of the reporting stuff comes with it. So as long as you have ITSM standard, you'll get DPM. The people that are viewing those DPM dashboards that I showed you, they don't need to be licensed, but if you drill down on something, that's when you need a license. So that's a quick overview of what we went over last week, but if I could show you more detail last week, we went into some detail on that piece. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me close my door real quick. Don, you can take over here for a minute.
Any other questions about what John ran through? Okay.
So Don, this is the part that you were talking about a little bit. It's almost like we have the CSDM. Tell me if this would be useful to everybody. Like I like how the CSDM does this. They have the people named, the personas. It's almost like we need a slide like this, like with the people on the outside. I think that's the most important part of this picture, right? And then, because everybody just jumps at the boxes right away. But if we get the people right, and if we could take the people and put them on this, if that would be a useful thing. Like it's probably most of these people, right? The BRM would be one.
Right. I would agree. I think, yeah, aligning the people to that diagram would be very helpful in terms of, you know, kind of who's doing what at what stage. And then maybe we could also add a bit of kind of a racy to it in terms of, you know, who's responsible, who's accountable, you know, kind of give people a perspective at each stage.
Yeah. And if we did it at a high level, we could probably do it like this, but yeah, we'd probably need a RACI at each stage too.
Right.
So if we had this slide and then I had a RACI underneath this, and it would be, okay, review the ideas queue, promote the ideas to demand, and they would be the kind of the primary on it, right?
Right.
And then here, it would probably be the enterprise architects and the app owners. I wonder if we take these same people and kind of lay them on there, if that's the right. And right, because those are the people that are up here.
Right.
And it's kind of pushing everything through to the service. Now down here,
John, in APM, the architects, when you look at the roles, and I don't know, we're not using it, but so I can't really speak from, you know, perspective of in practice. But when you look at the roles, the architect has much more access in APM than the application or service owners, right? So on your chart, if you're looking at people, are you looking to kind of depict that where the architect is the primary role? You would think for application portfolio management, the application owner would be the primary, but in APM, that doesn't look to be the case. It looks like it's more for the use of architects than application owners.
yeah, I would agree. So up here, we'd probably just want to put, maybe it doesn't have to be enterprise architect, because I know a lot of you don't have enterprise architects, but whoever's acting in that role, it could be solution architects up here, I think, in a lot of cases. So is that what you're saying, Lou?
Yeah, I'm just saying if you're looking at overlay your people, I'm just pointing out that should maybe be something to consider, because the roles that, you know, it's like an admin, right? Admin does everything. Well, in APM, the architect does everything, but the app owner cannot do as much as the architect.
Yeah. But up here too, I guess there's some, yeah, I guess I'll just leave enterprise architect up there for now. And then, because that's who we would do the RACI for. And maybe we'll just change that to architect and then have the RACI drill down on that. And then how about for, who's deciding what is the role or what are the responsibilities of people saying how this thing's going to get funded? That's like all over the board, right? Who's usually picking that out for a travel request? I don't know who on here, because that's where you get into the committee, right?
Well, isn't that doesn't the demand manager play, a big role, if anything, a facilitator, because it's at the demand before you go to the left. Is it going to be, operational expenses and operational enhancements, and the operational expense, bucket is going to fund that, or is it going to be a project Where you go to the right, you need capital funding, right? Because you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a project versus maybe 10, 20, 40,000 to do a, operational enhancement of some kind.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, it's going to have all different. That might be a hard one to put a person on then, because that's going to be all over the board, right? Different levels of approval. Have you hit different things? Did you have one done on this area, or was this not a big area of concern for the governance for your customer?
I guess I like what Lou said, that maybe the demand manager's the facilitator for that discussion, deciding whether or making suggestions as to whether it's coming out of an operational expense or whether it needs to go to some type of committee.
But the approval piece, though, because this is more of the approval piece, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if they would be involved in the approval.
Well, yeah, they're shepherding the demand all the way up until that point where it gets approved and it goes to the left or to the right. It's either OpEx or CapEx, depending on your organization's setup and funding criteria and thresholds. Now they may not have a vote on the approval. They could, or maybe they don't, but they're right there at that fork in the road, and it's going to go one way or another typically.
Okay, so you're saying they'd be here up to here, and then maybe here is where somebody actually decides the products and the apps we use, right? So this is where the other part of the CSDM might be connected to, right? Because now we're knowing we're using these 3 apps to go ahead and build this service out, right? So who would make, so this is the investment decision and kind of the model decision, right?
I believe so. And yet again, I can't see your screen, but yes, sounds right.
Isn't there somebody here that needs to be the sponsor, that would be the person that's accountable for making sure this all gets delivered and would be the one that gets credit when it does?
And the one that pays for it.
Yeah.
So what do you call them in your org? The sponsor?
Sponsor.
Executive sponsor, potentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Depending on the size of the project. Yeah.
They go right here.
Yeah, that's where they would be involved. They'd be, part of the selection process in my org, and then investment planning, they'd be there too, to make sure that the capital expense has someone that is accountable to make sure it's well done.
Okay. Okay, and then down here, they would, so it'd probably be whoever, like up here, they'd make some decisions. So it should already have the kind of either the product or the service that we're changing hanging off it by the time it gets through here. So when it comes here, that should be done already, right?
Yeah.
Everybody agrees with that? Okay. So when this comes through here to this piece, I should already know the product or the service or the offerings that I'm working on. I'm kind of wondering how it would go back, but I don't want to go into that right now. Like how it would go back into the project path, right? Because a project path would be, oh, it's a really big service. I guess there's a lot to do, so we're going to do a typical project. I think one of the big things that I see a lot of my clients making the mistakes here is they don't own this process, so the vendor comes in and every vendor has a different process. And it gets really hard to see, to track things because the last vendor did it differently and the next vendor did it this way and the other vendor did it that way. And does anybody actually dictate the process that gets used to build out these services when they bring vendors in? Or is it the vendor usually saying this is how we run projects? Does anybody?
John, it could be both. I mean, but basically every organization I think has their methodologies that they use: hybrid, agile, waterfall. And when they do their projects, vendors are usually embedded, and it's typically, I would venture to say most organizations where the organization is leading the project, right? The vendor is just, the subject matter expert. But I suppose some organizations could have situations where the vendors will lead in, and of course the vendors might, as part of the condition of doing that business, might say, no, we have to, we're successful with our methodology, so you have to use our methodology or we're not doing business with you.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anybody's doing that, because that's what I would want to do, right? I would want, because a lot of times what we're getting to here, especially with citizen development, is we're starting to get where these teams that are doing these things are a mixture of people from the department, maybe vendors helping out, or like staff aug, and then the ServiceNow team. So it's starting to spread out more from the ServiceNow team, but we want to get the process down so we can do that in a controlled way. So that's why I was wondering if there's anybody actually saying that, if you're a vendor that we're going to, do business with us, this is how we manage these things.
At Santa Monica, we wanted to go that route. I think its problem is like, first we need to have our processes and the PM methodology mature enough to kind of like saying, hey, vendor, follow these. This is where you need to put the stories. This is how you actually do the design. This is how you name things. And yeah, but I think for that, we are just waiting on the maturity for the organization to be there first.
Okay. Yeah, this is definitely one thing I think that I would want as a core capability if I were doing it. Okay.
It would be interesting to have another version of this for a pure agile team where things happen a little differently than the waterfall-ish way that this looks. Maybe that's something you guys could give some thought to.
So how would you do that? How would you map back to the service? Because that's what I've been giving a lot of thought. Like when that travel request comes through, is there a product called travel and expense, and then there's more requests coming in for the offerings, or is it higher than that, like all admin services? Like what's the product grouping on that if you're doing all agile? Because I think what you're saying is you're just getting epics dropping in and not, you're skipping all this, right?
Yeah, a pure agile team, the team would somehow get the idea. It may or may not be set up as demand. It may or may not go through a very heavy strategic architecture review and or direction if it's a small effort. There may or may not be a part of the demand pipeline that could be pretty informal. The investment may just be run investment or just the normal keep the lights on investment. And then it just kind of gets into the queue where it'd be an agile methodology where it's just put in the backlog and it's worked.
Would that be this down here?
Yeah, it kind of collapses a lot of the pieces there.
Yeah, that's kind of the DevOps thing that you're talking about, right? It just, but this has them coming in right as stories, but it could be epics too.
Right.
And they're just doing the regular,
Yes, size effort, yeah.
I think that's what this is trying to depict down here. That we didn't really talk about that. We were just talking about the new innovation piece today, but I think, yeah, there's definitely those teams that are getting that. But then that new stuff always has to have a place to land. But a lot of times if it's a new service coming in, it's not really going to have this already happening, right? There may not be the team present. So you got to pull a team together.
Think about a minimum viable product that is born, and then it's took through a subset of this, and then it's enhanced after the minimum viable product shows value. Just a different, it's the same boxes, just some of them are just de-emphasized.
So what is the MVP on my example here? Is the MVP like all of the admin services and then you're just building a travel and expense thing? Or would it be the travel and expense would be the MVP and then just the travel request is the minimum viable product? Because it seems too small to do that with it. Like if there's not an existing team, right, that's kind of building that type of stuff.
You may just build the request and that may be good enough, and fulfilling it may be not a part of that MVP. Whatever it is to prove that the concept works and shows success is an MVP in my mind.
Okay.
And what everybody else thinks.
You're kind of wondering the how it gets assigned here. And like a lot of people are asking me, do we create a product out of that? Does it have to be a new product that we're supporting? Does it like getting that structure set up here, that work structure, so that you're able to receive all those things and it's not all going into one ServiceNow team, right?
MVP typically is a subset of a team. It's one pizza, not even two pizzas.
So that would be a product, but there's not a team there yet on my travel expense example.
It could be just somebody just take a weekend and go and build an MVP. So this is great. This has got all the pieces in the handles the large projects, large investments. What about the other end of this? And maybe that's what everybody else can work out after seeing this. Just a thought.
Yep. Okay. Yep. I've been working with a couple states, and the states we're trying to figure out how to set those up so the teams are. Somebody have a comment? Okay. All right, so we'll kind of table that for now, but that's one of the things that we've been going around is like, how do we the right grouping of people to catch these types of requests as they're coming in. Today, it's all the ServiceNow team, and now we want to say, hey, Department X, go build your own form, and then bring that form to us, right? And then we have the work kind of started, but who's like the team picking it up to the next level? I guess there's a lot of decisions to be made in there and how that gets structured. We can just leave it at that, like you said. So the new considerations here, the one we talked a little bit about, but the new considerations here are those, we're starting to see more people pick up those citizen developers where developers in ServiceNow are just, they don't want to sit there and build forms. So they're like, hey, get me 60, 80% of the way there on the form, and I'll pick it up from there and just do the last mile or the tough fields in the form that you can't do. Sometimes we're even getting, instead of just the low code developers in different departments that are outside of that core ServiceNow team, we're actually saying, okay, now people are pro code developers. There's actually developers that are inside the agencies. And then even sometimes what we're seeing is now there's BRMs that know, because our process is standardized, we can now push some of those responsibilities outside the core. The core pieces, I think, that the ServiceNow team has to maintain are, well, not even this, right? If this is centralized for all apps, then that core piece, right, I think has to go through that single point. And then the other piece that has to go through the single point is when you're kind of managing that service, the structure of the service and the portfolios of the services. I think that's kind of a central point too. But a lot of the other stuff I think could be outsourced along the way. And that's what we're starting to see more and more of with these different models, right? Where the different people are coming in asking to use the platform. And then you have those solution owners, like the person in this case would be the person asking for the travel request would be that solution owner. And then, like I said, the people doing the forms. So what I had here, just the last few minutes, we're right at the end. I have a couple solution owner slides in here. So these are repeats from last week. And then I just went over the key concepts here, which is instead of going ahead and doing like we usually do, change it around a little bit for the release process and the governance on it. So instead of going and preparing the case, and we talked about the BRMs up there, defining that body of work, which is more in that kind of agile structure that we talked about today, releasing the service and then reporting on it. The only suggestion I made here is kind of creating the process that flips those. So start reporting on the service before it's released so that you give visibility to that solution owner. Okay. And next week, just a quick teaser. The next meeting, it's going to be a couple different speakers. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on that part of the common service data model. We're going to focus on this area, which is an area we haven't spent time on, but I'm getting a lot more questions on it, is how do we go ahead and start building out that area? And if you guys want to bring in anybody who's doing your modeling or any EAs you might have, that'll be a really good meeting to have them on. So Duran is our APM, Principal Product Manager. And then Peter is from a partner of ours called Inspy, who we had on the call before. And then invited somebody else who's on this call today. And hopefully they can speak as well, where we can actually hear from a customer EA team that's using ServiceNow today and talk about a little bit how they're using that core model that we keep focusing on to deliver services for their organization. I don't know if it's internal, external like that was before. I really like that idea on structuring the idea queues like that. But the EA team could speak to that if we do get them on for March 22nd. And that's it. I'm a minute over as usual, so I blabbed too long. Don, thanks for helping out today. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
And
thank you.
and
Good
thanks
job.
everybody who chimed in.